For women, there's so much emphasis on the idea that your partner is always going to want sex with you, and that's sort of fundamental to your femininity, to your appeal or your desirability. So if that's not your situation, then
Mm.
you can start to feel hopeless about, is there something fundamentally off in this
Mhm.
dynamic?
Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. Broadly speaking, men are generally more interested in sex than women. However, there are exceptions. Some estimate that 20 to 30% of married couples are in marriages where the wife is the one with actually the higher libido or the higher sex drive, however you want to call it. Higher desire wives have a unique challenge that higher desire husbands don't have, as well as many similarities of the challenges of just having libido differences in the marriage that both a higher and lower desire couple faces. And my guest today is Kat Roebuck. She's a fellow sex and marriage coach, and she's an expert when it comes to living as a higher desire wife and the challenges associated with that. And I'm so lucky to have her on my podcast today. She also happens to be my cousin. You can tell I've got some really smart extended family. Somehow I missed that gene, but you'll get to hear from her today. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to better understand sexual desire differences in marriage from a higher desire wife's point of view. I particularly like the discussion about how to love with our sexuality or through our sexuality and not just treat our sexuality as a reward for good behavior or on the other side of love. It's actually a way we can love others. Also, you're going to like her black belt sex tip at the end. This December, I want to invite you and your spouse to join us in our first Get It On-a-thon. This is a fundraiser that we've partnered with Faithful Family Foundations to raise money and awareness for couples that are struggling to have a baby. So another way of calling it is we want you to get frisky for fertility this December. And how it works is you and your spouse pledge, let's say, $1 for every time you're going to get it on in December. And those donations, 100% go towards a worthy couple to hopefully have a baby by next year, Christmas. More details will be available here in the show notes on a link to our webpage. We also have our upcoming couples retreat in March, and I would love it if your circumstances allow for you to join us. This is an in-depth look at intimacy in your marriage, and we also have a lot of fun at the same time. All those details are on the getyourmarriageon.com website. Catherine, welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited too. We've known each other for a very long time, and we finally get the opportunity to do this together. And I'm really excited about today's topic too. So, what's it like being a higher desire woman? What are the challenges in our society?
The most difficult thing is just feeling like there might be something wrong with you because you're going against the cultural stereotype or the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a loneliness to it. I actually think this is true for both partners, that the lower desire husbands have the same type of loneliness, where
Right.
if you're hanging out with friends and the topic of sex comes up, you're going to feel like the odd one out. You're going to feel like there's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
But for women, there's so much emphasis on the idea that your partner is always going to want sex with you. And
You're being pursued all the time and everything. Right.
yeah,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
yeah. And that's sort of fundamental to your femininity, to your appeal or your desirability. So if that's not your situation, then
Mm-hmm.
you can start to feel hopeless about, is there something fundamentally off in this
Mm-hmm.
dynamic? Well, I don't think there's something fundamentally off, but it does set you up to be thinking that way. That's one of the big challenges, is just getting to a point where you even feel understood
Uh-huh.
by other people, by yourself, by a coach or therapist. That even in a therapy setting, you can run into a lot of kind of easy solutions. Oh, it must be a hormone thing. Have his testosterone levels checked, that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
that's so easy. They say it all the time. Right.
Yeah, that's
Uh-huh.
the only possible explanation here. or maybe it's a porn habit. That's the problem. There's just like people reach for these simple answers on this that do a real disservice to being able to solve or improve the dynamic.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. So what does help with the dynamic?
It's not that different from
Any other
working
higher,
on it,
lower
right?
desire? Uh-huh.
It's not really that different. It starts with accepting that this is based on choice, that you're not
Mhm.
entitled to another person wanting you. And it isn't necessarily a message about you. It might have something to do with you, it might not.
Uh-huh.
But at its core, the desire differences are a normal part of a committed relationship, and they aren't a sign that something's gone wrong.
Another thing I heard once is desire, high desire, low desire in the relationship isn't an accurate way of putting it. It's higher desire, lower desire. It's always relative. Kind of
Yeah,
like, Catherine, if you and I to stand up face to face, standing up against each other, one of us is going to be taller than the other person, likely,
right.
right? Yet you could be in a totally different setting and you'll be taller. I'm assuming I'm taller than you, but
Yeah.
assuming like you're in a different setting, you're going to be taller than someone else. So it's like you married a person where you have higher desire than that person, but it could have been a very different scenario had you married a different person. You could have been the lower desire person in that relationship.
It
It's
can even change within one relationship where I've actually been
absolutely.
on both sides of it,
Uh-huh.
which is interesting because there's different things that are challenging on each side of it. There's a little bit of sadness to being lower desire in a relationship because you feel like you're holding up this good thing in a way. A lot of
Yeah.
people who are lower desire would, if they could just snap their fingers and raise their desire level, would.
Right. Yeah, if it was
So,
that easy. Where's the
yeah,
where's the magic pill? Where's the food I should
right.
eat? Yeah. I got a
Yeah.
question on that on Instagram too. Are there any for sure fire libido boosters out there? Mhm.
But the other thing that is
Mhm.
interesting is there's this assumption that more desire is better. And a
Mm.
real turning point for me in lowering my anxiety and resentment was starting to look at what's the matter with me that
Uh-huh.
I so badly want to go get rejected,
Ah.
that I cannot resist this scenario. I know how it's going to go. And I am
Uh-huh.
so into it, apparently.
You're a glutton for punishment, that's all.
Really, genuinely. And
Uh-huh.
then to start to think about it that way and be like, do I just really like getting turned down?
Uh-huh.
Why am I so into this? It actually, well, it lowered my desire ultimately, but
Uh-huh.
that was the way it needed to go because both higher, your level of desire can be artificially high or low due to like anxiety or regression factors. So it's not always coming from a good place. And there's an
Right.
assumption when you are higher desire that this is coming from a good place and what your partner is doing is not. Well, not always.
That's a good point. I worked with a higher desire wife once where she's higher desire because it's validation seeking for her. She
Mhm.
loves feeling pursued. She loves the way her husband talks to her in sex. She feels really pretty and wanted. And she hasn't quite developed how to, at that point, how to, stand on her own 2 feet and to self-validate those feelings,
Right.
right? Always look to her husband to do that. So she would pursue sex a lot because it was very validating, but it turned into a chore or a job for him to make her feel good.
Mhm.
And so he would withdraw, and the more he'd withdraw, the harder she would pursue. So it became a pursuer distancer dynamic.
Yeah.
And so then she's proud of herself for being higher desire. But we got to also ask why. Why is a person higher desire? Because we just blanket assume it's good to have a lot of desire. And I think most generally people do think that. But
Mhm.
why? Why are you higher desire? Because that matters a lot. You need to look at that.
Yeah. And what is it that you are ultimately desiring? Because it might be that, like you said, you really want validation.
Yeah.
What
Uh-huh.
what you're really after every time you seduce your partner is to hear them say that they love you, that
Uh-huh.
they're into you.
Right, right. It's like mirror, mirror on the wall. Tell me I'm the fairest of them all.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful.
I-
Right, and so that is not the same thing as having high desire for loving your partner through sexuality.
yeah. Right. That's good. And as we have Sextember coming up, that's a good reminder. It's
Huh.
sometimes we're higher desire because we wanna meet a quota or we wanna check something off or accomplish a goal, and I mean, if both people are into it, that's fantastic, but
Oh, I don't know, Sextember, this is like a daily sex challenge or something, or what is it?
it is. It's a
Yeah.
yeah, uh-huh, yep, making September the sexiest month you've ever had. Yep, Sextember.
Okay. All
So
right.
some people do pursue it that way, and it but, you want it to be highly intimate and highly erotic, both
Yeah.
in your interactions, so
Right. Well, and what I find over and over with people who are higher desire is that frequency is not really the solution. That there's much more satisfaction in having great sex once a week than having okay sex 5 times a week.
yeah.
So really kind of letting go of some of the expectations that you put on it as well of if you've just got a number in your mind or something like that. There can be a place for that sometimes,
Mhm,
but it's also easy to just get hooked into a way of measuring something instead of checking in with how this is really impacting you and your partner and your marriage.
mhm. You said something just a moment ago. You said, "Really loving someone through your sexuality." Tell me about that. Some people, that's not such a foreign concept to them,
Mhm.
or because 'cause they've probably never allowed themselves to be loved, sexually, or they don't know how to love through their sexuality. What's that like?
Well, that's what it's really for as far as I'm concerned. If you look at like why are we doing this? It isn't typically about procreation, doesn't take that many times. It isn't typically about managing a physiological urge or something either because you could handle that other ways.
Uh-huh,
It really does come down to something you're doing relationally. And if what you're doing relationally isn't about loving each other, you've got a problem. But it is very common. It's not an unusual problem to have. It's extremely common to be having sex for some other reason than to express real love for your partner. But this is where the quality of what's in your mind can really impact what you're doing. That if you're touching your partner and you're thinking about how they're thinking about you, you're
uh-huh,
thinking about if they're judging anything you're doing, am I taking too long? Do I look fat from this angle? That
uh-huh,
is not going to be bringing a lot of cherishing into your sex. If you are touching your partner and you're really thinking about how much they mean to you, how much you value having them in your life, how curious you are about what's going on in their inner world, not in because you have to have it be something validating, but because you want to know them. That's the intimacy piece. It's like, I really want to understand you. And that kind of quality, even if you don't change anything about your physical technique, is going to make the interaction so much richer, so much sweeter. And it can be difficult for people to let it in, like you said. It can be difficult to let yourself be loved that way.
mhm,
It can really stretch you, but in a beautiful way that really promotes your personal growth, your
yes.
development.
A lot of the men I work with in my men's coaching program are in a relationship where the default has been, "I want sex and she doesn't,"
Hmm.
for so long that they're almost apologetic to their wife that they want to have sex with them
Hmm.
because it feels like an imposition. How does one change their thinking from that kind of an attitude where I'm imposing on my wife for wanting to have sex with her to I am loving her through my sexuality?
Hmm. I think there's two pieces there. One of them is just being able to validate your own desire as a good thing. And you have to be honest with yourself about whether it is a good thing because
Mhm.
if you are treating your partner like they're just kind of a tool to help you sleep better at night or something, then that's
Uh-huh.
great.
Yep.
That
The
taking the
pacifier.
command
Uh-huh.
yeah, if you look at, like, everybody I know who got married to have sex, like, not as the only reason they did it, but they got married planning to have a sexual relationship. There may be some couples out there that that's not the case.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I actually haven't run into any so far, so
Uh-huh. Right. Uh-huh.
you're not doing anything untoward by saying, "Hey, this is a sexual relationship. That's what we agreed on." You are if you're saying, like, "This is a sexual relationship. That's what we agreed on. Therefore, you have to do it whenever, however I want." But just wanting to deal with sex in your marriage is nothing to apologize for and nothing to feel bad about.
Mhm.
Um, being unwilling to collude in avoiding this just because it makes you anxious or causes some conflict or something. It's a good thing, even if your partner doesn't like it, you know, to take a stand for this is something we actually have to handle for the good of the marriage.
Right.
Um, that's a dignified position. And then the other piece is really paying attention to if I'm going to love this person, I have to be attuned to them.
Mhm.
And so I have to actually pay attention to what happens to them emotionally, physiologically, when I'm touching them or when I'm talking to them. I tune in on the level of, can I feel my partner's heartbeat? Can I feel changes in their skin or muscles from how I'm touching and what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And it really makes a difference to be paying attention at that level. And it's related to the feeling while touching exercise, but just to, when you're touching your partner, to be thinking about this as I'm sending love like through my body, through my hands into them. And just to be thinking that way changes the dynamic.
Mhm.
So there's that. And really being able to track what's happening for your partner. If they're not receptive at all, can you challenge them on this in a way that's collaborative, that is not making this a them problem, but is also dealing with what is hard for you about being sexual with me? What are the kinds of thoughts that come up for you or the kinds of messages you're getting from me? Or, can we take this on as something that we have to handle together, not as something that you, lower desire person, have to go away and solve on your own?
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
come back to me when you're fixed, you know?
Right, right.
Or I know all the solutions. That's an easy place to go when your higher desire is, I know all the solutions. Just follow my 10-point plan.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
and we'll have you fixed up in no time, right?
Right, right.
Well,
Why doesn't that go over very well?
who doesn't love to be a project, right?
No, no one does. Uh,
Yeah, especially in the bedroom where it's like very exposed, very intimate, and you're feeling like you're being evaluated
mm.
and graded. So, yeah.
Yeah, not at all. Any personal experiences around this whole topic of talking to your spouse about your sex life that you're willing to share?
Well, a real turning point for me was when I realized that a lot of the sex I had initiated went poorly for both of us. And
Mhm.
when I really started to take that on as a me issue instead of looking at it as what's wrong with him that he'd turned me down,
Uh-huh.
and started to look at what's wrong with me that I would be proposing things that I know neither of us will actually enjoy that much. So that's part of it, is being willing to look at, is there a problem with my desire as the higher desire person? Is there
And
something in
maybe the
this?
sex you're offering in it, right? Am
Yeah.
I offering good sex?
Right. What are the meanings here? Is this
Mhm.
about, do you love me, or is this about, I love you?
Right.
Anytime it's about, do you love me? Your partner's got a good reason to be turning that down.
Mhm. Mhm.
I sometimes joke with clients about if they had proposed with the kinds of meanings that they bring into their marriage now. Like, look, here's the deal. I need sex 3 times a week, and I want you to be the one to give it to me for the rest of my life. Will you marry me? It just
Uh-huh.
completely kills the romance. And so we know this when we're dating, and we know that the romantic thing is like to really let your partner know how much they mean to you and to connect with them on that level where it's about expressing your love. Then as soon
Mhm.
as you're married, it can turn into you owe me.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. That's so
Yeah.
funny. It's so true. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So
You
that's
don't
a
get
lot of
down
what
one knee and say, "Will you love me?"
right. Right. No, but that's what we do all the time in marriage. We're
Uh-huh.
we're out there saying these very non-romantic things to our partner and being like, "What is your problem that
Right.
you're not into this?"
That's funny.
Yeah. So a lot of it's being willing to take yourself on about what you're really doing here and how appealing it really is. Is there a reason that a prudent, reasonable, good person would say no to what you're offering?
Mhm.
Really looking at that.
Right. That is so good.
And then paying attention to another thing I see is that the lower desire partner sometimes just has like a different style
Mhm.
and of what they like. And that you may not be as accommodating of that as you think you are.
Uh-huh.
So really making room for, if I tend to want this to be like, we're trying all these different things every time. And my partner is more about like, can we slow this way down and have some nice music playing and candles and stuff? How often am I really doing it their way?
Uh-huh. Right, right. So in a way, you do adapt to the lower desire spouse's style. Like,
Hmm.
for example, let's say you could have sex in the morning or the night, but your
Yeah.
spouse is only a night person.
Hmm.
Then you're not going to demand that they get their act together so they can have it in the morning every time. You're going
Right.
to, the wise thing to do is for the higher desire spouse to go on the schedule of the lower desire spouse. And that works. It's very practical, right?
Hmm.
So that's kind of I think what you're talking about.
Yeah. But doing that without thinking that your way's better, which is a really easy trap to fall into when you're
Yeah,
hired.
right. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So really, really being interested in why that works better for them, caring
right.
about.
Mm-hmm. Good, good, good. All right, Catherine, I want to hear your black belt sex
Mhm.
tip. This is a sex tip that this is for couples that already have a good marriage that want to propel it to their next level. What's one tip you would give them to really take sex next level?
I would say pick your favorite sexual memory of the two of you and
Uh-huh.
write it out
Uh-huh.
and really emphasize what you liked about it. This
Uh-huh.
is going to be super exposing for most people, even if you've got a good sex life.
Uh-huh.
But to let your partner know, when I think about us, this is what I think about. Like
Uh-huh.
this is the scene, and here's what stands out to me. I remember this one part of it. That was the peak for me, and why I think that was. That can give you so much insight into your partner's erotic map in their mind, and that can really drive intimacy and can also help you create more peak experiences going forward. Because you can't always predict what factors matter most to someone. Maybe like smell is a huge deal for them, and you are not a person who cares that much about that, and you never considered that that might be a big factor.
Right.
Um, or maybe you said something that just really like landed for them, really, really hit, and it's not something that you realized landed differently from the other sweet things you say or the sexy things you say in bed. So yeah, I'd say that you want to get into your mind. If you want to expand on good sex and make it fantastic, you want to be bringing more of your mind into it and sharing that with your partner, and then asking them to do the same.
Mm-hmm. That'd be good. What a great exercise. I love it. Thank you. Anything else you want to share about high desire wives?
Well, the other thing I would be thinking about is what kinds of messages you are sending in general in your marriage about masculinity, because that's one of the things that can be difficult about being the lower desire man, is that it can come with this real hit to their sense of masculinity. Same way being higher desire woman can be a hit to your sense of
Femininity.
femininity.
Yeah.
But you want to be sensitive about that. Like you want to really be thinking about, if I want my partner to be more assertive and I want them to be more passionate and stuff, how am I handling it when they do that? And it might be in totally other areas. But
Mm-hmm.
really looking at like, do I treat them like the kind of partner that I want them to be? Or am I
Right.
constantly jumping in and telling them I know how to do it better? And, just if you're taking charge everywhere and you want your partner to take charge in the bedroom, that might be a tough ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. That was so good. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
Well, I work with adults and couples, so individuals and couples, and you can find me at catroebuck.com, or you can email me at cat@catroebuck.com.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Please share it, along with our apps Intimately Us and Just Between Us, with your married friends. I promise they will thank you for life. If you want a more meaningful sexual and intimate connection in your marriage, I invite you to check out my Get Your Marriage On program. Over 100 couples have said this program packs tremendous value and has helped their intimacy grow to the next level. Now, go get your marriage on.